Welcome in here to Weather Wagers post Super Bowl edition, and unfortunately, we do not have a lot to celebrate from the Eagles' loss in the Super Bowl to the Kansas City Chiefs. But boy, oh boy, what a game it was. Brett Thacker, Dan Tommaso with you here. We are working our way through February. We've got a big show for you coming up. We're going to recap, of course, what happened in the big game. One of us gets that pie in the face, and we've got a special surprise guest we're going to talk about coming up.
We certainly do. I've already moved on to baseball season, unfortunately. I've been listening to baseball talk all week. I'm excited, and part of it has to do with today here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's going to be 65 degrees. The sun is shining. Football season's over. I'm ready to move on.
We are getting something in the weather world we call warm advection. And I will tell you today.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. It is not stopping. We could see highs across the East Coast getting into the 70s. And boy, does it feel like it's time for baseball. But we do want to talk about the podcast first, Dan, and tell people again where they can find us. If you want to see video evidence of what is coming about the pie in the face, and if you want to suggest any side wagers that we can wager on as we move into baseball season, you can email us at weatherwagers@gmail.com and tell folks where to find us and then how to get the video feed too.
Yeah, so abc27.com, we post the video every week. You can go to abc27.com/weatherwagers, or you can Google us that way, too, to find us on the website if you're having trouble navigating. Plus, we're on YouTube. Plus, we're on every podcast platform. And if you can't get enough of us, give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Like, subscribe, rate, whatever they say about the podcasts. And on YouTube, you search ABC 27 News, and then on the news page there, we're under playlist. We've got our own playlist.
We have our own playlist. It's a great thing. And I will tell you what, as baseball season heats up, we have some weather affecting some of the games, even spring training. I normally tweet about it, so even on non-podcast days, I'll be talking about it.
Can you make that full screen there for our audience on the YouTube? And there it is. There we are. So find us wherever you go. Now let's review last week, because we do want to talk about the Super Bowl. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the game, but, of course, we had a lot of prop bets, and for that, you could see, again, the record's pretty abysmal. But let's bring in Dave Shiner. He was the one that set this up for us. And, Dave, how do things look when it comes to the prop bets? We hit some. We missed on others.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, it was a little tough because you were trying to fade each other on occasion, but you guys came out exact same, 6 and 9. It's the way it goes, but you definitely did a little better on some of the actual yardage-related things.
The actual games.
Actual game
let's
stuff.
But you made a mention to me that, Vegas was so close on that national anthem.
Yeah, so the over-under was 121.5 in seconds, so that's 2 minutes and 1 second and a half. And no joke, it was 2 minutes and 1 second even. I watched it 3 different times, and the under hit every time, even with the long note ringing out at the end before the planes came across.
It
was kind of crazy how they just know stuff. And like another one we were talking about earlier, obviously we'll go over all these, but purple was the liquid poured on the coach, and I wouldn't even put that as an option if I was making these lines. So,
especially for the Chiefs.
Yeah, you'd think they go red or
maybe
water.
they all like grape or glacier, whatever that flavor
might like
is.
that flavor for sure.
Is part of the problem the red dye issue? Everybody talks about red dye now is a big problem, so maybe they ruled it out.
I don't think Andy Reid cares about that.
No,
but,
he just draws mustaches on people.
Exactly.
He does.
Exactly.
He
We'll
does.
get to the bottom of that.
All right, coin toss. I got that, right?
Yep. Tails never failed for Brett on that one.
But heads has been the most common, so I thought I had that.
Well, it's a 50-50 shot.
That's right.
That's one of the toughest things to bet on there.
Yeah. So, and then moving on down the line, the Eagles did score first, so you both hit on that one. And then we get into the halftime show, which
we flunked.
Yeah, censored for the podcast. B, Better Have My Money was the opening song, not
Hot
Umbrella
start.
or Where Have You Been?
Well, and we were excited because Where Have You Been, Umbrella, she did those.
Yes.
But it had to be the opening.
Opening
and
song.
I had forgotten that point.
Yep.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. And then, she ran solo for the entire performance, which was a shock to, I think, most.
That was shocking.
So you both kind of fell on that.
But she is pregnant.
Yeah?
So she truly solo.
Yeah.
Okay.
True.
Semantics. You might be able to get a push on that one. I don't know. And then running down, this is the one that I couldn't believe. The over-under for songs, 9.5. I thought there was no way we would get to 10 songs, and she did 12.
And you did the over there.
That's
so
right.
You got me
So
there.
Dan won on that one.
Yeah, the mashup, as you want to call it.
Yep. And then we're moving on down here. More passing yards, Hurts or Mahomes. You both went Mahomes, and Hurts had 304 to Mahomes 182.
And if you would have told me that stat before the game,
you
I
think
would
a
have
W
said,
is there, right?
I think the W is there for the Eagles.
Yeah, for
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow.
Yep. And then another kind of shocker to me was the more rushing yards. Pacheco had 76.
Good call there,
Sanders
Dan.
had
Big 10 guy.
16. Yep.
Yep.
So Dan won on that one.
And by the way, quick note on that, and we'll get into this briefly, but, Andy Reid finds a running game against us. I mean, how ironic is
Well,
that?
I think that played into a lot of how Andy called like a heck of a game because he kept them honest. I think that even when they were down in the second half, their first 4 plays were runs after that. So they were making sure that we were staying honest and staying home. And you know what? And
they did it.
And
that's why they were
some
winners.
of the analysis has shown he was doing that to see what type of coverage the Eagles were in, and then he'd play off of it. So
and so many receivers wide open, which was the next bet here.
Yeah, so most receiving yards, Devonta Smith had 100 and Travis Kelce had 81, which yet again, you think Travis Kelce has 81 yards.
And he had a good game.
But it was only really on 2 big catches. Everything else, they were just getting the ball out quick, and I think that was how they were trying to combat the defensive line, really trying to get at him at that point. Moving on down here then, back to what color was the liquid poured on the head coach.
It's very surprising to me that this is what we ended up with.
Yep.
I mean, you went clear, and I thought that was actually a very good guess.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't believe the winning. Tell everybody
it was
in case they
purple.
missed it.
Purple. Yeah. So that was a shocker, I think, if you're in the prop bet world. Now you guys do a little bit better. Combined total points, the over-under was 51. Obviously, 38-35 was 73.
And I will admit, in the middle of that podcast last week, I just took the under to be different.
Yeah. I had to double check with Dan
it.
to make sure that I didn't mark it wrong there. So Brett got the over, Dan went under. Longest field goal made was 35 by Mr. Jake Elliott. And you both thought the over of 47.5 was going to hit. It did not.
Yeah, that was a little surprising, too. But there was so many touchdowns being scored, they didn't need to worry about field goals. We should have maybe thought about that.
Yep.
Mahomes.
Yeah, total passing yards, as we said before, was 182. The over-under was 298.5. I thought he'd probably be under. I did not believe he'd be under 200.
No, and
so
they
just
huge. Didn't need him once Pacheco got going, too.
Well, and not only
couple
that,
short fields that helped them out with that,
Correct.
too.
They did
which were game changers,
They
obviously.
did not push the ball down the field. And I think that's a credit to the secondary of the Eagles.
Yeah.
They didn't try to go deep.
Yeah.
They really didn't.
You never know once you kick it off how these are going to go. Under for Mahomes passing yards hit, and then Jalen Hurts total passing yards was 304. The over/under was 239.5. We both, I think all 3 of us thought that he was going to go over for that, and obviously he did. And then our MVP, Mr. Mahomes, you both thought Jalen was going to be the guy. And
we knew it was going to be the winner,
and
typically the winning QB, and we
no doubt he would have been.
Yes.
Had the outcome been differently.
The fumble at the end didn't really play into it. Now, had he not fumbled, the Eagles may have won if you look at the score. But, he had a brilliant game other than that.
Well, and I tweeted you guys a stat yesterday. Jalen Hurts had the second highest PFF rating out of all quarterbacks in the Super Bowl since the year 2000. Who was first? Nick Foles.
There you go.
2 historic.
Well, I also think he
quarterback
had
performances.
first quarterback to have 2 rushing touchdowns in the first half.
And
I think he
had
had 4 total touchdowns, 3 altogether.
Did he finish with Steve McNair's record for rushing in a Super Bowl for a quarterback?
That I do not know.
He was challenging it into the second half.
I believe he had 73 was his final.
If he had 73, he broke it. I think the record was 65.
He definitely had
about that?
70 plus.
Okay,
so
well,
then
there you go. So,
and you know what?
and it's still hard to believe with all of that they didn't win.
In fact, I think his most impressive run was the 2-point conversion.
Yes.
They hit him 2 yards behind
he was able
the
to get
goal
in.
line, and he still managed to
Unreal.
get in to tie it up there at the end.
He was as good as you could have been.
Yeah, so I think the future's bright. And we did have the tiebreaker of the total points scored. Dan was at 63, Brett was at 61. So if we're using Price is Right rules, Dan was the winner there at 63. But you guys tied, and it didn't make a difference for the pie in the face. So
no, it didn't. So we know how that goes. But also, in the last pick of the season was, of course, just against the spread in the Super Bowl, which we both went 0-1. So I will tell you, I think the goal. Who did you say? Was somebody talking about? What did you just say about? Was it a bright future, or what did you say? Somebody said, I forget the verbiage you just used, Shiner, about something. I don't think we have a very bright future when it comes to picking.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were talking about the Eagles in general. I was
Here's
like,
the-
I
I'm
think
talking about
the
talking
outlook
about
looks good.
Dan and
Dan and
me.
you as
Well-
sharps out in the desert? Probably not.
I was going to say, though, perhaps going into next year, we now know how wacky the NFL was this year compared to other years. That
True.
there truly weren't dominant teams.
Yep.
And I don't see that changing.
No. Now, the key thing here, though, is if you look at my record of 88 and 100, if you had bet more money on the 88
Correct.
and you bet on the 100, you still might make some. 91 and 97, which means even though the records suck, you can see what we've got here, and that would be Mr. Tommaso. So let's pull this up on camera. Dan, I want to say congratulations. It was
Thank
a
you.
long season.
It's
and,
been a fun ride, though.
It has been a fun ride, and you eked me out in the end, as Dave said. You know, we tied with the prop bets, so
We did.
That means that you held on to it. So yesterday we took people into our studio. And how excited were you to do this?
Well, I honestly...
You were a little devil yesterday because you actually said this is 13 years of working together.
A little pent-up aggression there.
I mean, you know, all those early mornings I've worked for you that I'm exhausted from. But no, seriously, I take a lot of pride in my picks that I come
should.
up with every
should.
single week.
Yep.
And the season is very long. It's a marathon. You can have one good week and then tank the next.
And we each had that.
We
at
went back
times.
and forth at times, and it was very, very close through the mid part of the season. The NFL really tipped the scale in the end, and that's again the lesson for next year for those who follow along. If we know now that there's a ton of parity in the NFL and we don't see a lot of movement over the offseason,
We got to focus on that. We got to focus on that, especially in December. That's what killed me. So, as they say in the business, let's roll the beautiful pie footage.
All right, so we're here today. Brett and I decided to do this podcast back in September at the beginning of college football season, beginning of the NFL season. We also had the bright idea of keeping track of our scores when we pick games.
Yeah.
And I think this was your idea. How does it make you feel? Yes.
Well, listen, we had to have a payoff, right?
Yes.
We had to have a payoff at the end of football season. The Eagles didn't do so hot in the Super Bowl.
No, but they did get there.
They did get there.
And we both picked them, so we both got that one wrong.
The Phillies didn't do so hot in the World Series, but they did get there.
They did get there.
Okay.
So we had a great year.
Penn State won the Rose Bowl,
Yes.
and now our picks went a little awry at the end.
Yeah, the NFL is hard to pick. For those who've never tried to pick NFL games, that's where we started to go below 500, if you will, on our records.
But at the end of the day, you won this
I did
wager.
win.
So you've got the pie. Now, by the way, we
I'm
are
certified
in our,
most accurate now.
you are. In sports and in weather.
That's right.
Tell everyone where we're at here.
So I believe the split was about 6 losses.
Yeah.
So-
and we're going to get into all that, but we are in front of our
Oh,
green
yes,
screen
this,
here.
this first.
Okay, we're going to try not to make a mess, but we wanted to do this in the studio. So this is the culmination of the whole season.
Yep.
What flavor do
This
we have
is
here?
lemon meringue. So
Okay.
you're going to get your facial treatment here of lemon meringue and
All right.
cream this
and
morning.
you're going to really give it to me,
I'm
right?
gonna really give it to you.
Like wind up and
yeah, this is
slam me.
This is 13 years of buildup of working with you.
I think you need more than one pie. Okay, here we go.
You ready?
I am ready. Wind that.
This is
puppy
for
up.
the overall record.
Yes.
I beat you, I think, by 6 games.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
It
sir.
was close, but here we go.
You ready?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. And that is what's left of the pie.
Yeah. Man, look at that thing. You got to really shove it in, though. Go ahead.
You want
do
it again?
Do it. Go
3,
ahead.
2.
Okay.
Wow, it totally separated.
Oh, nice work.
Nice work.
This
Nicely
is what
done.
we have to clean up now. Okay.
All
you
for a
win.
podcast.
Let me shake your hand. There, I got you back. All right.
Now you
Cut.
don't need to go to the spa.
Cut.
Now, by the way, I should say that there was some complaints from the peanut gallery that watched that that pie didn't stick enough to my face. But I will say this: if you were underneath it, it did. And I was tasting lemon well into the evening last night. And a couple of people that work here said you needed just a whipped cream pie where you do the thing, but I didn't want that because that's too easy. You need a real pie, and the lemon meringue just was a little too tough. But listen, it did the trick, and when you got me the second time, it worked.
It did work the second time, but I was shocked
Yeah.
because I thought the whipped topping would kind of surround
come
your
off,
face.
yeah,
right,
right,
and
yeah.
it just didn't.
It was a little too eggy with the meringue there, but
Perhaps this was the man coverage at the goal line that went awry for the Eagles.
well, let's talk about the Super Bowl here, gentlemen, because as the world turns, so do the Eagles, and just like with the Phillies, we tasted it, and then we came up just a little bit short. Do you think? And I'm just going to ask both of you this, and we've got a special guest looming, so we're going to get through some of this quickly. But do you think there was one play that changed the game, and whether it was the terrible call at the end, which I don't think really, we had opportunities that we blew. I never like to blame it on one call. I mean, it probably shouldn't have happened because it was so ticky-tack. But is there one play where you felt the game did turn? Dan, start with you, and then we'll go to Dave.
The execution to the point of the fumble was so good. I mean, they were doing whatever they wanted with the ball. They were about to go up at least by 2 touchdowns. Perhaps they would have settled for a field goal. You never know. But the fumble with Jalen Hurts, the team had all the momentum. I don't know if he saw a ghost. I don't know if he tried to take off without the ball. That really kind of put them behind a little bit, behind schedule, rather than executing on every play. So that's when things kind of went awry, and I just had a gut feeling when they settled for that field goal on the long drive in the second half. I was like, ooh, that's going to come back and bite, because you need every point. And Nick Sirianni had coached that way throughout the entire season. He was going for every point possible rather than settling for field goals. And when they settled for a field goal, I thought to myself, ooh, it's probably a blown opportunity.
Yeah, I actually think in the wrap-up meetings yesterday, A.J. Brown said that when they only kicked a field goal and went up 6, he thought the game was over, which is telling by how defeating that maybe was for them.
You feel the momentum shift,
yeah.
right?
Now, as far as I think it really comes down to 3 big plays. One, obviously, you can never give Patrick Mahomes more points than he has scored himself. So the fumble recovery touchdown, although they came back and drove it right down the field and scored right again, I think you just can't give free points away. And when you lose by 3 and you gave them 7, do the math, that's a thing. But I think the real big one that might have changed the whole second half was the incomplete pass by Devonta Smith that they overturned.
Yep, that was big too.
I don't know how you overturn that. You can say maybe they gave him a gift with the Goddard catch later in the game.
If you're Carl Cheffers, you can overturn a lot.
Yeah, but if they have that ball,
it's bang bang
on the what was it, like the 3 or 4 yard line at that
Changes the whole
point,
complexion.
and you go up, I think that would have put it 31-14 at the time instead of 24.
It's big. You
big.
can't get that back, and that they just didn't score enough points in the second half to hold them off.
Yeah,
and again, defensively, we didn't get a sack. Mahomes was running around there like like we knew that he would, but I just felt like it's not that we weren't trying, but again, defensively, it wasn't up to the standard that they had played with a lot of the year. So it comes down to a few plays. It was a heck of a game, and they were right there until the end, but just coming up a little short. So is this a dynasty for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs? I mean, they've been to 4, they've won 2. Hard to argue that at least they're starting one.
It's his conference. I mean, I will just come out and say it. It is Patrick Mahomes' conference. They got rid of Tyreek Hill because of money. And who knows what else was going on behind the scenes, but it didn't slow them down. They have just as much speed. Mm-hmm. It is going to be a tough team to beat, and every team now in the NFL is going to emulate them. That's how this works. You see an offense that is prolific. It's going to be a copycat situation, and Joe
It's
Burrow.
a copycat league.
Yeah,
but it's true.
Joe Burrow's great. Josh Allen's great, but they're not Patrick Mahomes. I'm sorry.
Doesn't this feel a little like the Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, Joe Montana days, where all of those same teams, kind of had the AFC by the horns, and now this could be a lot of round robin. But I mean, it's hard to argue that Andy Reid is that team. Well, it's the team to beat.
And is it going to be Andy Reid's team much longer? Because he sort of hinted in some of the post game stuff that maybe I'm going to hang it up, but I don't know.
Why would you?
I mean, he's got great
going
coordinators.
Out on a high note.
He's got great coordinators that aren't leaving. I mean, Spags, an old Steve Spagnuolo, an old Eagle coach, Eric Bieniemy, for whatever reason, gets passed over for jobs.
Well, and I know there's a narrative there, but let me just say this too about Eric Bieniemy. If you're the offensive coordinator for Patrick Mahomes and you have 2 Super Bowl rings, do you want to go and coach
elsewhere?
The Washington Commanders?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Do you want to go and coach the Indianapolis Colts?
Nope.
Okay. And we're going to get into that. So I'm just saying, if there's a job out there that he really wants and wants to go for and gets passed over, then that's one thing. But if I'm Eric Bieniemy, why would I leave for a really crappy franchise?
Except for
thanks.
both of our coordinators decided to leave after losing the Super
But-
Bowl. You'd think
True.
you want to be in
I
that
will
same
say-
thing with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, which
I agree.
you can make a lot of parallels to Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes right now.
100%.
I mean, they are the same
100%.
kind of player that can do it with their legs,
Yes.
but still have the arm to win
And
games.
you know what's great about it? Jalen
He's
Hurts
young.
is young.
Yeah,
Now
very
he's going to
young.
get paid here.
That
always throws
well,
a wrench in it.
It does,
you know?
but that leads right into my next question. Can the Eagles be right back next season? I mean, the pieces are there. Some may not be, but you've got the coach, you've got the quarterback, you've got the GM, you've got the owner, you've got all of those pieces that are aligned here. Can the Eagles be right back and be the team to beat in the NFC?
Yes. I don't see another team in the NFC coming up to their level in 1 year's time. The way they've built this roster is special. Even if they pay Jalen, they can still pay others because, again, however Howie works this magic, he is able to kind of compartmentalize. All right, we got our D-backs over here. We got our safeties over here. We don't pay running backs. We already paid our tight end. We paid our wideouts. They are set up. I mean, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, they're all going to be there. And maybe there is a different RB1, but how much
could
does
be
that
a couple
matter?
new faces
Could
next
be.
year, which
Could
I think
be.
a lot of this is going to lie on Howie and how he's going to fill the holes that they may lose. I mean,
But he is
Gardner
so
Johnson's
good.
on coming off the books. That might need to be a re-sign. Bradbury, Kelsey, is he retiring?
That's a good
Miles
question. Yep.
Sanders. I mean, there's a lot of guys that made. Obviously Sue and Joseph. They're
Yeah,
probably
sure,
not going to be on
sure.
the team next year. But now
Or
is
could
it
they
a
come
Jordan
back
Davis
halfway
team?
through?
Who
he,
knows?
He has been so good at being creative. Like, he doesn't jump into the frenzy of free agency, which, to his credit, that's how we got Bradbury because we still had leftover money. The Giants had to cut him for not handling the cap well. And then we were ready to be like, hey, you want to come 1 year deal, prove it deal? And look what happens.
And don't forget, there's still 2 first-round picks at 10
I
and
know.
31 available.
I'm giddy.
You know.
Okay.
This could be a dynasty.
It could be, but you got to win one first. So that's why I asked if the Chiefs were, and you said they are. But can the Eagles be right back? You're both saying they can, but here's the deal, though: they have all of those pieces in place.
Yes.
You're getting, as you pointed out, though, 2 pieces they don't have in place. Shane Steichen going to the Colts
That's big.
this week, and then the D coordinator goes to the Cardinals, right?
Yeah, Gannon.
And for everyone who wants to run him
Gannon.
out of
So,
town,
yeah.
somebody thought very highly of him. And,
Right.
I was going back and forth on Twitter yesterday because a lot of the Philly people that can't understand how we lose that Super Bowl were all over Gannon. Gannon's defense
Are
gave
you
up
saying that
24
you were
points.
arguing? Well, hold on a second. Are you saying that you were arguing Twitter with people from Philly?
Yes.
That never happened.
Did
Never
you
happens.
get beat up on Twitter?
A little, because people want Gannon out of town, and I'm just thinking to myself.
But I mean, if listen, if Twitter was a parking lot, and you have people from Philly coming at you, I'm picking the people from Philly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dan,
Well,
but I mean, you're a weather nerd. Did you put these people in their place?
I tried to. There's a couple radio hosts that I got very frustrated with that were portraying
You're going
the
after the
narrative-
media now?
Of course.
He's the media. What are you talking about?
Because it was a tired argument, in my opinion. They don't get to the Super Bowl without Gannon.
It's true.
There were
This
games.
guy just lights up Twitter.
There
and
were
walks out.
There were times in the second half of the season the offense wasn't humming,
Yeah.
but the defense was. And so you can't tell me that without as good as they played down the stretch, that they win all those games without the defensive coordinator and defense.
So he's off to Arizona. I mean,
He
so
is.
I back to my original question here. Can the Eagles be right back and do coordinate? I really think coordinators matter in college football. I don't know that they matter as much in pro football, although the
debatable.
argument can be made that they do. And so, can the Eagles really be right back if they have to replace 2 key pieces? And now we're going to get to that point of, okay, the head coach has to replace these people. Can Nick Sirianni do this and do it effectively? And it's late, so now where is he going to go? Your thoughts on that quickly?
I'll just quickly say that I think success helps with all that. Guys will be interested to come to get a chance at a ring. It's as simple as that. Shiner?
Yeah, it's tough because it's really hard to judge someone on just one game and one performance. It just happens to be the biggest one of the year.
Right.
So, yeah, I know why people are going after Gannon. One of the coolest things.
Arizona should be happy with that.
They should.
Yeah.
And I think the Colts are going to like Shane as well. And the one
They
thing
need
I
talent.
thought was
They need talent.
yeah,
Not
one
sure I'd
thing
wanna
that was
go to the
really
Colts,
cool
though.
about him accepting that job during his press conference, he went down the line and thanked every single offensive player for getting him to where he is today with
awesome.
tears in his eyes. So he obviously,
It meant a
although
lot to him.
it's hard to pass up a head coaching job
sure.
if it's
Yes,
offered,
sure.
but he obviously loved this team, and I think Gannon did too. It was a special team, and we should remember it for what it was. And good luck to those guys, but there are some people waiting in the wings that you could probably promote within. We had talked about the quarterback's coach, who was a
Brian
Jalen's
Johnson,
guy,
yep.
Brian Johnson, coming through. That could be a possible OC candidate.
Knows the offense. And so the one thing I saw yesterday was this is Sirianni's offense, not Shane Steichen's. Sirianni built this thing in Indy.
Yeah.
So we should be okay no matter
Correct.
who he brings in. It's kind of
Correct.
like we talked about the Alabama coordinators last week. The defensive coordinator matters a little bit less. That's Saban's unit.
Correct.
Right? The O coordinator is going to be the head coach of the offense. So in this case, what you're suggesting is Nick can bring in a guy that he trusts to run that offense that he built.
Correct.
But the defensive coordinator may matter a little bit more. And all of a sudden, you're throwing out before we started recording. Did I hear Lovie Smith's name come up?
There are some people in the Philadelphia area saying that might be a good fit at DC. It's funny
Are
that
these
that
the
guy
same
keeps,
radio hosts I was going after yesterday?
Yeah, because I think
I don't
wanna
know.
go
I can
after them.
I can quote Tyrone Johnson on that one.
Gotcha.
But hey, we got to see what they come up with. I think the defense is probably the unit that's going to be the most overhauled personnel wise
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
So that plays.
Is
into
Reddick
it.
back?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
signed.
he's locked up.
So-
it's mainly the guys they brought on the
vets.
line.
Yeah.
You know, Joseph and Sue, and then obviously the back end guys in safety and
Well,
corner.
And he was a great pickup as well, Sue. Let's
Oh, yeah.
throw that out there.
And by the way, it may not all come together at once. I mean, these guys are going to take their time. But the fact of the matter is they all had fun, and they got to the Super Bowl as they promised.
Yeah.
So
And of
I
course-
feel pretty good about some of these guys coming back.
We will discuss those hires when they're made. I would assume they're going to be made this week.
I would think so, although, there's a lot going on in the league right now. You got to start thinking about the draft, so perhaps this week, maybe it drags a little bit.
Well, and I'm sure some coordinators are more involved than that than others. I mean,
Correct.
that's the other thing. Are these guys going to come in and does Sirianni want his guys involved in the draft process? Does Howie? We don't know that. I mean, it depends on the organization. I don't really know if the Eagles have their coordinators evaluate draft picks or not. It's
hard to say.
It all
We're
comes
not
down.
in those rooms.
Well,
I
no,
wish I was.
It comes down to the GM and the head coach philosophy there, and I don't know, but I would assume within the next week or two they have to make these hires.
Well,
Remember
yeah.
one thing too. Sirianni was actively lobbying for his coordinators to get head coaching jobs during the Super Bowl media week, saying how good they were. So maybe he already has a plan in place
I'm
here.
sure he does.
sure
If
he
he
does,
was
yeah.
actively, trying to get his guys jobs, you don't do that without having some kind of a
face
backup
it.
plan.
I mean,
You're right.
He brought these guys in. Gannon was not a coordinator before. Now Shane was. Shane had called plays before, I believe, in San Diego. But still, I mean, he brought these guys in relatively unknown. There's some rumors about a Packers linebacker coach he might be interested in to bring in as the next.
These
D
guys all
coordinator.
have their little black books.
Correct.
And I'm sure Sirianni is the same. So we are going to follow that story and, of course, give you our thoughts on that as we see how these hires play out over the next week or so. But now it is time to flip the switch and talk about spring and spring baseball and spring training. And we're looking out the windows here of our content center, and my, oh my, is it a beautiful day. As Dan mentioned, spring fever is in the air. And we had a chance to talk to a very special guest. Dan, I'll let you kind of set this up a little bit here.
Well, I think kind of lost in the Super Bowl shuffle is keep in mind who the Phillies are putting out there this year. Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, possibly Andrew Painter. That's your starting rotation.
We're going to hear a lot about Andrew Painter in just a minute.
We blew up the bullpen a little bit. We brought in some veteran guys, big arms, and I'm talking big arms, like exciting velocity type stuff. Plus, again, kind of flying under the radar here due to the Eagles' success, the Phillies signed what could be the top shortstop this year So already inserting an offensive piece that wasn't there for the playoff run.
It's nothing but big hitters, big fun. You've got Schwarber back. Harper eventually will be back. You've got Trey Turner now. You've got Real Muto. And you've got so many
a healthy JT, too.
Big hitters in the lineup. So we wanted to bring in a special guest to talk about the Phillies. Dan, again, briefly, tell us who we got on this podcast.
So this is a guy that I have followed throughout my Phillies fandom, if you will. He's made appearances on Daily News Live back when that was a thing on Comcast Sportsnet. He worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Now he writes for The Athletic. He is the Phillies beat writer, Matt Gelb, and we talked to him about all things spring training baseball and looking ahead to this baseball season. Let's roll the tape. For many years, I've followed a lot of your career from the Inquirer to the Athletic, and you've gotten to cover mostly regular season, hopefully postseason here and there, and a lot of the hot stove. So tell me what it was like during the playoff drought. I know it was a long time for Philadelphia to not have playoff baseball, and then kind of that cathartic release, like, hey, they finally got over the hump, and they got over the hump in a big way.
I mean, I think that was the cool thing for a lot of the diehard fans who, still paid attention during that decade in the desert, really. I mean, and it was neat to see the whole city and the whole fan base get excited about it. But I think for the people who have been watching, like, it was extra special because there were some pretty bad years. I mean, I think for me, when I cover baseball, like I'm not Phillies fan. Like, I'm covering the Phillies, and like my dream scenario is a team that's really, really, really good or really, really, really bad. The teams that are just kind of like in the middle and kind of sputtering along, and they tease you think they're good, but then they're bad, and then they end up about 500. That's like the least entertaining season for me. And there were a lot of those kind of seasons in that 10-year period. But there were a lot of people who came and went. There were still some great stories to tell, I think. And I love getting feedback from diehard fans who follow, and then I got a lot of that in the 10 years. And then when they finally make the playoffs, I've used this line in a couple of my stories last October, and I still believe it. Like, looking back on it now, is like, I think people connected with it so much because it was so unexpected. And think about, like, the best gifts that you get are the unexpected ones, the ones that you had no idea were coming. And I mean, man, like, I've started to go back and rewatch a little bit the last week or so. And there's a lot I actually don't remember from that run because the days just kind of bled together, especially at the end of the season. I was on the road. The Phillies were on the road for like 18 straight days in 5 different cities. And some of that I remember, some of it I don't really remember. But what a time. I mean, it was unbelievable. And we're seeing it again with the Eagles here in the Super Bowl. But soon after that, pitchers and catchers will be in Florida, and we get to talk about baseball again.
And you're right. So much of the focus right now is on the Eagles. Phillies had a great year. Now, on this podcast, we've been meteorologists about 20 years. We know about the weather, and now we get a chance to talk a little sports too. But as diehard Philly fans, we watch a lot of games. So we want to know, though, from you, from some of the snow and the cold in early spring baseball to thunderstorms, summer, some of the wind, how teams can navigate through that, maybe some of your favorite stories from the beat regarding weather, and how that might even affect, Matt, we had some rainouts during the playoffs that affected pitching rotations. Just speak about some of your memories regarding any weather situations that come up.
I mean, just a lot of sitting around, rain delays. Like, I hate rain delays. It's like it is the worst. I mean, I know no one likes a rain delay, but it's yeah. I mean, the one memory that sticks in my head is, I don't know what year this would have been. You can probably still find the tweet. The Phillies had been in a long rain delay. It was getting pretty late. They were at home, and they decided to resume the game. And there was right before they were about to throw the first pitch of the resumption, there was a lightning strike. And I know it's deceiving. Like, you can't really tell how close the strike is, but it was close. Like, it was loud. It was bright. There was thunder right after it. It was a close lightning strike. And I tweeted something like, "Oh, is this safe?" And Hurricane Schwartz, a legend here in Philly,
yes,
immediately replied. He's a huge baseball fan too, huge baseball fan, and immediately replied to my tweet, and just in all caps, it's just "no" with like a bunch of exclamation points. And I was like, okay, like this is great. Like, this is a crowning achievement. Hurricane replied to one of my tweets, but been a lot of rain delays, snow delays. before I covered the Phillies, I sat in a 6 hour rain delay for a
Oh,
Yankees Nationals game.
Ooh,
It was like one of those where it was like the Nationals only trip to New York, and like they wanted to get the game in, so they waited 6 hours. It was supposed to be 1 o'clock start, started like 7:30. Um, my favorite, although my favorite rain delay memory though is again, I don't know what year it was, probably 10 years ago. Phillies put the tarp on the field. They leave the tarp tube in the middle of the field, just to hold down part of the tarp, which
sure.
makes sense. But there was an ambitious fan who decided to run onto the field during the rain delay. And like, yeah, okay, people run onto the field all the time. But this guy was a genius. Like this guy had figured it out. He went right for the tarp tube, and he wanted to get into the tarp tube so that they couldn't get him. And he was halfway into the tube when a security guard just pulls him out by the ankles, and like he almost made it. And I still think that's like one of the most genius things I've ever seen. Don't run on the field. I'm not encouraging that.
well, I was going to say perhaps some of that was going on with these big Eagles wins or Phillies win in the NLCS going to the World Series. I mean, it just seems like the town comes alive with craziness whenever that happens. But talk to me, Matt, a little bit about, we're watching the games, Brett and I at home. We know that there's going to be a line of showers or thunderstorms coming on through. How tempting is it to kind of play meteorologist there in the press box? Are you watching radar? Are you thinking the same thing we are? Like, they got to get this game in. They got to get through 4 or 5 innings.
All the time, but I'm terrible at it. I mean, like I'm upset. Like my go-to, and I know it's not exact science, but I use Dark Sky a lot.
Okay,
I used to use
sure.
Dark Sky a lot, and that app is now gone. Apple bought the technology, I guess, and folded it into their weather app. But in baseball, actually, Dark Sky was like a very popular app. Like I know people who like trusted it pretty well. But yeah, I would always be. What I'll do is I'll watch. Like I'm watching to see if the groundskeeper will come out between innings and talk to the umpire, talk to the crew chief. You'll see if like the grounds crew is like gathering near the tarp, like ready to kind of roll it out at a moment's notice. I'm always looking at the radar. I resist trying to play meteorologist though, because I know it's extremely hard, and typically when I do it, I'm wrong. So I try to avoid it.
Good answers there, and it's certainly neat to get Hurricane Schwartz involved. Last weather question before we get to some baseball stuff, but I believe, and Dan, help me with my memory, one of the games had to be pushed back by a day or two in the was that the World Series that they had a rain out, or was it the NLCS
that the
and the pitching
rotation got pushed?
Got pushed. Do you remember talking to Rob about that, and if he had his thoughts on that kind of messing with the pitching rotation during the playoffs?
Yeah, well, they had like almost a 4 hour rain delay in the NLDS in Atlanta that turned like a day game into a night game. And then the World Series, there was game 3, the first home game was pushed back a day. And that did adjust their pitching significantly. You'll remember also in the NLCS, it rained in game 5. It rained for about, I don't know, the hardest rain came down for about a 15 minute period in the top of the 7th inning when Sir Anthony Dominguez was on the mound and could not grip the ball. He threw 3 wild pitches and the Phillies fell behind. But of course, that just led to the dramatic moment of Bryce Harper putting the Phillies ahead and winning the pennant. But it was funny that it only rained hard in that very moment when Dominguez was on the field, and you kind of felt like there was something going on with the baseball gods and the weather gods there. But yeah, I mean, that rain out in the World Series did affect their pitching plans. And like they were always thinking about, especially, it's interesting, the playoffs, the league is more involved, with decisions on when to play and when to wait. And they weren't going to start a game in the postseason if they didn't think they could play the whole game. That's not how they do it in the regular season. So the strategy, I guess, is less effective because maybe they were at a point in the regular season where we're like, oh, it's going to rain. Like we know we're going to get 3 innings here. Well, why don't we hold back our starter and let's like pitch somebody else to start the game. Then after the rain delay, we'll come back with our starter. But that in the playoffs wasn't really a thing just because the league was really involved. They weren't going to, and they probably could have played that World Series game 3 that night. It actually wasn't as bad as they thought, but they were just like, let's be safe and just push it.
Yeah. So talking about these playoffs and the run itself, I mean, looking back on now, you said you're watching some of the games, but how do you make sense of it? Was it just getting over the hump, getting through that first round, the wild card round? That it just seemed like this was always going to happen. Once you saw it happen, it made sense. But getting there was the hard part, I guess.
Yeah, I don't even think it was getting past the first round. It was just getting in. And think about it. I mean, getting in and not getting in has hovered over this franchise for a long time now, and it did create a certain amount of pressure, I think, within the organization, and the players felt it. It trickled down to them, and I think once they got in, there was just, and the players talked about this, Rob Thompson talked about this, like there was just this freeing effect on all of these guys that, like, we got in, we don't have to hear talk anymore about how the Phillies collapse or how the Phillies choke, and like let's just like see what happens. Like let's make the most of this opportunity. And I mean, you guys remember like that first game in St. Louis, it could have gone a very different way. And like
the Phillies
don't come back. The Phillies don't come back in that ninth inning. They probably don't win that series. They probably never get out of St. Louis. The season is over. It's still a success. They made the playoffs, etc. But they came back in game one, and that momentum really carried them. And I don't know. There was just this. There was a different feeling, I think, once they got in. It was a more relaxed clubhouse, and they just kept doing surprising things, and that energy really built.
And, you know, talk about making sense of it. I mean, this was a season that included your star player going down with a UCL injury, also getting hit on the hand, plus there was a managerial change. How was it this particular season that it all came together? I mean, out of all the things that could have gone wrong, a lot did.
It is crazy. I mean, and I think that you know, when Harper went down with the broken hand, I think that was when it started. When I started to think that there might be, you know, there's something different here. You know, I've seen decent Phillies teams the last few years, but it never felt like they could get over the hump. But when they had the 2 months without Harper in the middle of the season, and had different guys step up and had a winning record, not just winning record, a really good record when Harper was out, it kind of gave you the feeling that, like, okay, this team is deeper. They have better leadership. There was more belief that they could get there. And then, of course, they had a pretty bad September, which made you doubt all of that. But I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, there were so many things going against them in the season, and it is almost fitting that was the year where they, you know, got over the hump.
I think September was for a lot of Phillies fans. Many of us ready to write them off again. So that's a great point, because they started to flounder a bit toward the end of the year. But let's talk off the field stuff for a second. The Phillies finally seem to have a winning relationship here between their manager and general manager, Rob Thompson, Dave Dombrowski. Is this sustainable? I mean, is this really happening for the Phillies? It would be nice to have some consistency for a change in the organization. What is their relationship like?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, Rob Thompson's story is a really charmed one. You know, I mean, after the season, after the playoffs, I wrote about how, I mean, he had gone into 2022 believing that this would be his last year in baseball. And it wasn't because he wasn't having fun anymore. He just felt like it was time. And he'd always been sort of a number 2 or number 3 behind the scenes guy. And put into that moment, I don't think anyone knew what was going to happen, but he really made the most of it. He's now signed to another 2 years to manage his team at least. Dombrowski signed another extension this offseason. He's going to be in place, you know, well into his 70s if he plays out his current contract. And yeah, I think it's a relationship that could last. I think, you know, they're two, you know, in a sport that has trended younger and more data driven. I think it's interesting that they have two, you know, pretty traditional baseball guys who are open-minded to new ideas and the way the game is played now at the top of the organization. And, you know, what Dombrowski is so good at is convincing ownership to spend money. It's what he's made his career on. And he knows how to spend the money well, and he knows how to convince owners to do it. And, you know, we saw it this offseason. I mean, they gave another huge contract out to the one guy that, you know, they had a big need in the lineup, and atop the lineup at shortstop, and Trey Turner does all those things, and there's another $300 million guy. So it's an interesting relationship because of how they got to this point. Dombrowski had turned down the Phillies a few times. Thompson never thought he'd manage, and here they are.
Yeah, it's quite the ride. And speaking of Dave Dombrowski, he's kind of known in the industry, I think, as a closer, if you will, kind of pushing his franchises, his teams over the top. But I'm kind of a roster geek, nerd, whatever you want to say. And I watch the 40-man roster a lot, the moving and the shaking that goes on throughout the year. I don't think I've ever seen a 40-man turnover the way it has between Matt Klentak and now Dave Dombrowski. Was it that simple of a formula? Did we just need someone to come in and make aggressive moves and bring about change? I mean, we were just stuck in a quagmire for so long, and now we're back, we're alive.
I think if what Dombrowski is best at is, convincing owners to believe in his vision and to give them the money to fulfill that vision, I think maybe what he's second best at is that he's a really good evaluator. Like, he knows who to trust, who not to trust, who to keep, who to get rid of. He's not going to be 100% in those decisions. I don't think anyone is, and we've seen, some decisions that might have backfired, but he's a really good self-evaluator. And I think he came in and looked at the roster and looked at the front office and said, started to talk to people, whose opinions do I trust? What players can help us now? What players can't? And you're right, there was a lot of overturn in this roster. I mean, what they did was they did a really good job building a little more depth, which is what befell Phillies teams before last season. And some of that depth came from within. It was just deciding who to elevate and who not to elevate, who to value, who not to value. And Dombrowski was very good at that. And he's been in this game for a long time. And I think he has a good feel for what works and what doesn't work and who to trust. And that's really helped this organization.
It sure has, and as you pointed out, he's been around a long time, and he's had success in multiple stops. So the Phillies are getting to experience some of that now. But I mean, you've got the names like Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Trey Turner. Now, as you pointed out, Matt, the Phillies are spending some of that stupid money that they promised to dish out. Two-part question, though. Can all these guys create a window of contention now that they're all on the same team? And then the second part of that question is, it seems like they all like each other and they've put their egos aside and they want to just be in Philly to be in Philly. But is that going to last too? Your opinion on that?
I think there is a window, certainly. I mean, yes, they've committed a large amount of money to a small group of players on this roster, but the majority of them are still in their prime, I think. There are still productive years left for some of these guys, especially Harper. I mean, we forget how young he is because he's been around. It feels like he's been around in the sport for so long, but he came out when he was 19. I think Harper still has quite a few productive years left, and Real Muto just continues to defy every aging curve for a catcher. What he did last year was unbelievable. And yeah, there will be a time when some of these guys do fall off. There will be some diminishing returns, and I think they know that. I think what's really going to be the story of the spring and really exciting is going to be some of their young pitching prospects. Andrew Painter is legit, and he's going to have every chance to make this team. He's 19 years old. So I think the idea of a window is that, we have some of these guys locked up. We have maybe trending toward an older team, but there are some younger guys in the lineup. There's some younger pitchers coming. They're trying to kind of hit that sweet spot where they have a mix of old and young. So yeah, I think there's a window. And yeah, do they like each other? Yeah, I think so. I can't. It's I'm around these guys all year, and my interactions though with them are still limited. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes I don't see, but I will say it's one of the better clubhouses I think I've covered. In 13 years of doing baseball, and it was a really good group. Kyle Schwarber was huge for that clubhouse. He's a really good leader. He's a guy that other players trust, that the coaches trust. He's just got a personality that is magnetic, and people love him in there. And I think he was a big part of that, of the team's success, both on and off the field last year.
I'm just getting super excited thinking about spring training and seeing all these guys again.
It is incredible, and I've heard other people say that about Schwarber too. Which again, you just don't know if these guys are going to be able to put it aside. But there's a Philly thing, and they say they all want to be there, so it's exciting to watch.
Yeah, and part of building that culture, you mentioned the farm system, Matt. I think obviously they've been playing checkbook baseball. They're signing these big names, big starting pitching, big bullpen arms, big boppers in the middle of the lineup, but you mentioned some of the youth coming in, and I think it's so interesting to watch the farm system rise and get better over time. I mean, that has to be the compliment, right? You can't just keep buying players. You have to supplement as well.
And they've made a lot of changes behind the scenes the last few years, especially since Dombrowski took over. They've really overhauled their player development staff, and it takes time, because they really were in a pretty tough spot. They came out of the rebuild, I think, with far less in the minors than they had hoped to come away with. It will take some time, but They put a lot of resources, a lot of money, and a lot of staff into their drafting and player development the last 2 years, and it has to be better. I mean, they have some guys who really helped them last year, some homegrown guys, and they have pitchers coming, but the system is not as deep as it probably should be, and it's definitely something that needs to be improved. And I think they've spent a lot of time thinking about it behind the scenes. I mean, it's not just what you see on the field. I mean, they had, a great success in the majors, but you're right. I mean, they've spent a lot of time thinking about player development. It has to be better for them.
And for those that don't know, too, I just want to follow up. Andrew Painter is a top 10 prospect, correct?
He is. I mean, I think you could make the argument that he's the best pitching prospect in baseball right now. I know there's some people who would make that argument. Yeah, I mean, he won't turn 20 until mid-April. He got to Double-A last year, his first full professional season last year, and he gets to Double-A. And the numbers that he put up in the minors last year were the kind of numbers that very few pitchers, let alone that age, put up in the minors. And he's legit. I mean, he checks all the boxes: size, stuff, mental makeup. I mean, there's a lot of people who are really excited about him in the Phillies organization.
Is there a plan for him this year, or does it depend on how things shake out?
I mean, he could break camp with the team. Like Phillies have never closed the door on it. In fact, they are opening the door to it. I mean, the way they talk about him, different people in the organization are so high on this kid that they think they don't want to put limits on it. Like they're like, this kid could break camp. I mean, he's in contention for the 5th starter spot this spring. Again, he doesn't turn 20 till mid-April. If he breaks camp with them, he could make his first start as a 19-year-old pitcher in the majors, and that just doesn't happen anymore. So, he's going to have an innings limitation because he only got up a little past 100 last year, and he is 19, turning 20. So if he does break camp with the team, they'll have to come up with some creative ways to get him through the whole season. Like, he won't make 30 starts for them in the majors in 2023, but I think they like him so much they're considering these scenarios because they're like, well, we don't want to waste. If he's only got so many innings and he's this good, like, why don't we have those innings in the majors?
Yeah. Yep, one more question to follow up on the farm. What about like Mick Abel, Griff McGarry? Who else? Is there anyone else that could break camp? I mean, what should fans be looking for here moving into spring training in regards to some of the young guys?
I think the spring's going to be a great chance to watch a lot of these guys because the roster really is, for all intents and purposes, set. I mean, it's really set. There's only about 3 spots, I think, that are up for grabs this spring. And some of the bigger names will actually not even be in camp for a while. They'll be playing the World Baseball Classic. So there's going to be a ton of playing time and innings for younger players in camp. So it'll be a cool chance to see some of those guys like Abel and McGarry. And they won't break camp with the Phillies, but I think both those guys have a shot of being in the big leagues at some point this season. Johan Rojas is a good outfield prospect, a really good defender in center field. He's on the 40-man roster now, so if there is a need during the season, you could see him. His game is speed. Like, it'll be really exciting to watch him this spring, I think, see what he can do. Beyond that, I mean, I don't know. There's not a lot of guys, that are major league ready. I mean, it's a system that has some really good high-end pitchers, Painter, Abel, and McGarry. And then, a lot of guys in the low minors, the recent draft pick, Justin Crawford, he won't be in big league camp. He's super young. He's going to need some time to even be in consideration. So those are the guys I would be looking for this spring. And there's some younger relievers that throw really, really hard that they'll have in camp. Andrew Baker's a guy, throws 101. Not a lot of people know about him. You'll see him in camp, and he's got a chance to be in the big leagues sometime during the season too.
Wow. We are chatting with Matt Gelb from the Athletic, and a few more topics before we let you go, Matt, and that is talking about some of the other teams in the division. The Phillies stayed aggressive. So did the Braves. So did the Mets. The Marlins are the Marlins. They've got some stingy pitching. So, the question is, can the Phillies overcome all that? It's one of the toughest divisions in baseball and compete again for a division title.
I think the great question is going to be like, how many wins will it take this year to win the NL East? Last year it was 101. Phillies won 87 games. Like, do they make that big of a jump from season to season? Maybe, maybe not. I do think the schedule probably helps all 3 teams. There's a new schedule this year. in the past, the Phillies would have played the Braves 19 times and the Mets 19 times. They won the division 19 times. It's now down to 12, I think, or 13 times this coming year. Every team is going to play every other team in the NL and AL this year. So it's a more balanced schedule. And the way that helps, I think, is that when you have a 6-team playoff field now in each league, in the past, it was hard for 3 teams in one division to all make the playoffs. Now, last year, it did happen with the Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies. I think a more balanced schedule probably helps that even more. I think you could have a division that has 3 teams in the 6-team field, especially when you look at the Central, which is kind of a weird spot right now. And there's a couple good teams in the West, but the NL is very much a haves and have-nots. I think there's already a bunch of teams you can kind of cross off before we even start the season, which is a shame. It shouldn't be that way. But I mean, when you come down to it, it's like there's maybe like 9 or 8 teams for 6 spots. I mean, that are legitimate contenders to make the postseason. So Mets and Braves had tremendous off seasons. I think I still think the Braves are the best team in the division. I'll say that just until they don't win the division. I mean, they're like the way they came back and overtook the Mets last year, I think was amazing. They have incredible homegrown talent, young talent that they've locked up. But I think all 3 teams are really good. And I think those games are going to be really fun, especially the games against the Mets. Like those are going to be really fun this year. I'm kind of upset that they're not going to play each other 19 times this year.
Right. Because especially as fans, you look forward to those ones, and I'm sure as writers too, you guys do too. But it is going to be a fun division to keep track of. Now, the main way for the Phillies to make a run is with Bryce Harper. We saw it last year. Of course, he's the big star. What are you hearing about his return, his status? We know he's going to miss part of the season. What's his attitude like going into this year?
I still think it's in like the early stages. It really is. I mean, he didn't have the surgery until like mid-November, maybe the week before Thanksgiving. And the Tommy John surgery just takes a little bit. You know, he isn't doing, from what I understand, isn't doing a ton of activity right now. Like he's not swinging a bat, he's not throwing, all that. And when he does return, he will be a DH to start. They're keeping the door open on him getting back out into right field at some point during the season, but he'll return as a DH first. And when, I don't know. I mean, like they're being intentionally vague with it. I think because a lot of it is they just don't know. It's not a normal injury for a position player. Obviously, this is a surgery that usually you see associated with pitchers. It's going to be a pain tolerance thing. It's like how much, how soon until he feels like he's comfortable at the plate. And maybe it's June, maybe it's early July. I don't know. Like if I had to guess, it's sometime in June. I don't think he'll start really swinging until late in March, like near the end of spring training. But we'll see. I mean, Bryce, like he'll push it, and he probably pushed it too fast last year. I mean, like let's not forget, like he was really bad in September. I mean, he did not look right, and he didn't look right until he took a swing early in Game 2 of that Cardinal series. He just crushed the ball, a solo homer to right field, and it almost was like that swing just like kind of unlocked something, and then he had one of the greatest postseasons that we'll ever see, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I could watch his swing all day. I mean, when he makes contact, it's loud, it's going somewhere, it's a lot of fun. Now, before we leave you, I want to ask about everyone's favorite unit on the Phillies, kind of the bone of contention, if you will, all throughout those 10 years and even leading into the Girardi years, the bullpen. This year, we have some additions, some subtractions. Out goes Corey Knebel, out goes Brad Hand and David Robertson. But in comes potentially a Hall of Famer in Craig Kimbrell, Gregory Soto, a big trade with Dombrowski's old team, the Tigers, and Matt Strahm on a big deal for a left-handed reliever. Did they finally fix this? Is it finally looking up? Or are we going to be an arm or two short again leading into the playoffs?
I mean, I think whether they fix or not is going to come down to like what do they get from Dominguez and Alvarado again? And they were incredible in the playoffs. I mean, the Phillies don't get to where they get to without those two guys just reaching a different level. And they pitched a lot last year. So you're wondering how are they going to be in 2023? It's a deep unit. I mean, I can't remember ever going to spring training with the Phillies having 7. I mean, they really have 7 bullpen spots locked up. And their 7th guy right now is Andrew Bellotti, who is a solid middle reliever who got pushed into some big spots last year and pitched well for them. But now he's your 7th guy. I mean, that's solid. I mean, that is really solid. They have a lot of guys who throw hard. a lot of guys who don't always throw strikes, and that's going to be the big question. Like, can they get some of these guys to throw more strikes? Can they have better command? Because the stuff is really good. Soto is a great example. I mean, he is as good as it gets in terms of stuff from the left side. Just doesn't throw a lot of strikes. So it will be interesting. They have a lot of options for the late innings that can kind of mix and match. And Rob Thompson did a good job of that last year. So it's deeper, and really teams with relievers, it's so hard. They're so hard to predict year to year. And you kind of try to attack it with numbers. And the Phillies certainly have numbers now. They have some, a collection of some really quality arms. So I guess we'll see.
I really think, Rob's feel for the bullpen, it was just magic to watch.
Yeah, it was magic.
It was incredible, especially compared to Girardi, where it seemed like no matter who he put into the game, it didn't work. Switching gears here quickly, Brett and I follow the business of sports and follow the broadcast rights, where broadcasters were interested in some of this. In terms of the baseball business side and streaming rights, we're lucky that we have NBC Sports Philly as our local RSN. We get to watch all the games, but obviously the industry's changing. What is the future? Is it still NBC Sports? Is it moving to Peacock? Is it moving to some streaming service like Apple TV? What do you see coming down the pike?
I think the future is the teams distributing their digital rights in their own way. It is probably the biggest story in baseball right now, and it's being covered probably not as much as it should be, because it's not like the most appealing topic to the casual fan, but there are going to be some big winners and big losers in this. I mean, there are going to be some teams and markets that have a certain amount of money coming in through their TV rights deal that is going to disappear, and it's going to be really tough for them. I think the Phillies have a strong relationship with Comcast, which owns, or with NBC Universal, which owns Comcast. Is now there's different names to it. I still call it Comcast, but and they have a huge TV rights deal with them. But that it may not last. I mean, I think the future is the Phillies distributing their own rights in a certain way, whether it's through an app or some sort of service. I don't know. I mean, I know that it's in 5 years, it's going to look really different. It's going to look totally different than it looks now. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to look different. I'm convinced of that. I mean, I think the current model is not sustainable, and you have the cable companies are losing customers because of a lot. I think because of the regional sports network fee that you see on your bill every month. I mean, it gets bigger and bigger every month, and I think some people are tuned out to that. So the league is looking for different ideas, and I think you're starting to see it. The Yankees are going to try to distribute their network, directly to customers. I think you're going to start seeing that everywhere, and it just means you're going to have to sign up for something new. And there's got to be a way to. It's funny because we go from having like everything is bundled, and then everyone wants to unbundle it, and now there's so many different bundles, and you're like, well, I want to just have something that has everything together. So it's like, well, you're describing cable.
The bundle.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
We argue that point back and forth all the time.
It's true. There is some benefit there still. So it is going to be interesting. Changes are coming, like you said. I don't think it is being covered enough, and we all kind of have to watch it wait together. So finally, you are going to be on your way to spring training very soon. But before we let you go, talk about how excited you are to head down there, and what are some of the storylines you're looking forward to get going here.
I don't know if I'm ready yet. I mean, this is going to end up being the shortest off season of my baseball writing career. I mean, the Phillies played up until the first week of November, and while it does feel like it was forever ago, it some ways it doesn't. So I'm excited to get down to Florida because it's always warm, and that's a nice thing. But the storylines. I mean, I think it's the biggest one for me is going to be Andrew Painter. Obviously, like it is the spring of Andrew Painter. Like, what does he look like? Does he make the team? Even if he doesn't make the team, is this a guy who's coming up in May and pitching for the Phillies, every fifth day? The other storyline I think is expectation. Like, how do you deal with expectations? I mean, there were no expectations before, or they were very low. And now the expectations are quite high, and rightfully so. So, I mean, how does Rob Thompson deal with that? How do the players deal with that? Like I said, there's very few roster spots, maybe one bench spot, one rotation spot, one bullpen spot that are up for grabs here. So the Phillies are looking for a very anticlimactic spring, because that means that everything, went according to plan. So those little things I'm looking forward to, but really it'll be good to talk more baseball again. And once the Super Bowl is over and can start talking baseball again.
It'll be fun. And tell folks where they can find you, Matt, and read your work and listen to you, too.
Yeah, so I cover the Phillies for The Athletic, and you can subscribe at theathletic.com. And I'm really proud of the coverage that we have for all the sports, all the teams across baseball and all the Philadelphia teams, too. Zach Brown and Bo Wolf are our Eagles writers, and they're have been doing awesome stuff during the Eagles run. It's really cool. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Matt Gelb, but you can also listen to me. I do a podcast called Phillies Therapy with Paul Boye, and we have a lot of fun with it. Paul's a big Phillies fan, and I cover the Phillies, and we kind of put those two things together and talk about the Phillies. And we've been very infrequent with it this offseason, but it'll pick up steam again as we get closer to the spring. We have more to talk about, so check it out there.
Matt, we really appreciate it. We can't wait to go on this Phillies journey with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we are back. That was a great interview. It tees up the baseball season. Perhaps Matt Gelb is batting leadoff for the Phillies here.
I tell you, he's going to have a great time down there in Florida. Just phenomenal information, a great interview, and who you can turn to for just phenomenal Phillies coverage. And final thoughts as we go into spring training?
Well, let me just say, it is very rare as a sports fan that we, especially in Philly sports, we've been able to carry one season into the next. We went from a World Series run into a Super Bowl run, and now I really feel good about what the Phillies are doing. They have a good nucleus. Bryce Harper will be out half the season thereabouts, maybe a little bit less. He should be fresh coming in, and a fresh Bryce Harper could be dangerous.
They're going to be hungry too, right? After tasting it and being so close to it. And how about that Andrew Painter? Gelb made a pretty big deal about him, and he's right. I mean, like you said, the velocity is off the charts.
And that's what it is. I mean, this is big power, big velocity type of league right now, and they're in a very tough division. But keep in mind, you don't play your divisional foes as much. You play everyone in Major League Baseball now, and you take off a few of those division games.
And that was a change this year. A lot of changes. We're going to get into all of that as we talk about spring training. The bases are changing. The Ghost Runner is staying. So many rules.
The Manfred Man.
Yeah, so many rules are changing. But Matt Gelb, great stuff. Our big thanks to him. A shout out to him. You can find him, as he said, on Twitter and at The Athletic. Tell people where they can find us and who we have coming up next week.
Yeah, so we have a loaded show next week, which you'll want to tune into. Audrey Snyder, we're staying in the Athletic family. She is the beat writer for the Penn State Nittany Lions. So we're going back to a little bit of football talk as we get ready for the World Baseball Classic, get ready for spring training, a little bit of an interlude there back to football. But you can find us, Weather Wagers, abc27.com. You can email us if you want to hear from one of your favorite beat writers or someone we can bring on the show. I'd love to have suggestions, contemplating maybe bringing on an Eagles writer or two to talk about the season. Certainly off-season is the time to do that.
And the great thing is these writers know so much about the team because they're there, they cover it, and we love chatting with them. We're going to try to get more special guests on in the off season here, but the content keeps coming. So you want to stay with us. As Dan said, you can find us on abc27.com, on the YouTube page at abc27 to see that pie in the face. Our thanks to Dave Shiner, our audio engineer, as always. And of course, there he is. He's working hard.
Always.
And getting those prop bets for us. And Dan, we are just so excited that spring is around the corner.
We certainly are. Everyone, enjoy your week. No big games this weekend, no football this weekend. We got to make that life adjustment.
Yeah, but there is no slowing down. We're going to be right back here with more content, as Dan said, next week. We will see you then. Enjoy the warm air, everybody.
And go Birds.